Welcome. You're listening to Literacy Now, the official podcast for the nonprofit organization Parents for Reading Justice, and I am your host, Brett Tingley. I am very pleased to have Jenny Mackenzie join us today. Jenny is a documentary filmmaker who produces films that promote social change. Jenny's films have aired on top broadcast channels such as HBO, Hulu, PBS, and Amazon, and have received praise in the New York Times, Washington Post, and the Boston Globe. Her most recent film, The Right to Read, which we got to see in Santa Barbara, which was amazing, is doing the film festival circuit right now, but is going to be out for the general public very soon. So, Jenny, welcome. And can you talk to us a little bit about what brought you to make this film, The Right to Read?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Brett. It's really nice to be here. I make social and racial justice films about topics that are near and dear to my own heart. And I was approached by a former funder at Sundance. I had a film at Sundance in 2018. And he said, Jenny, I really want to make a film about early reading and why kids aren't learning to read. And I thought of you. Are you interested? Does the topic have any significance in your life? And I immediately jumped in wholeheartedly. First of all, it's an industry that's so hard to get a little bit of development funding for. And I was diagnosed with dyslexia when I was 14 years old. So I was a struggling reader, and reading is personal for me. I grew up in a family that was college educated and certainly had privilege on many different levels. And I was that kid who flew under the radar and who really found amazing ways to compensate and cope with that disability. And then when I took my first standardized test, getting prepared to apply to colleges, I just bombed it, and my mom got me in and got me tested. And I was in a situation where until I made this film, I don't think I realized how lucky I was to have access to those resources that helped me to get tutored and get the kind of explicit instruction that I needed and the kind of support and help to make me a confident reader who was able to engage in our democracy. And that's really what reading is about at the most foundational level. It's everything. So I was all in, and that's when the film came to me.
Oh, wonderful. Is it surprising to you, though? I think it's fascinating. If you tell people that only a third of children in the country are proficient readers, very few people know that. Was it surprising to you when you got all this information and you really dug deep to find out that really so many children are being left behind?
It was actually shocking, I think, uncovering the statistics. And you know this, making a film yourself. But it really, when you make a documentary, it's kind of like a giant thesis. You have to go deep into the weeds and into the research. And the fact, that right now, 37% of our students are reading below basic. And what we know is below basic is not reading. And that should be, in my humble opinion, a 3-alarm fire. I mean, it should be something that we are all screaming and yelling from the rooftops about, because it means things on so many different levels. It means that people cannot engage in our economy. So what that costs us is billions of dollars. This is a nonpartisan issue, right? It's about all of our children. It's about our future. And it's really, as I mentioned, sort of foundational in terms of being able to participate, vote, function, fill out a job application, do all of those things.
Yeah. And to the future of the country. I mean, I don't understand how, and maybe we're beginning to see this play out in our country right now, but I think it's probably, I would say, about the most important thing that we need to do in this country right now is teach our kids to read. It's the gateway to the entire education and, as you said, the economy. So what was your goal in making the film?
Well, I think, I always think about documentaries as being a way to win hearts and minds and become a catalyst for conversation. And that conversation, you hope, leads to longer term sustainable change. So I think my goal is always to make a film that entertains and that inspires. But I think with this film, I think once we stumbled upon our amazing protagonist, Kareem Weaver, and sort of his work became so central to the narrative of this film, and this film really being about early literacy being such a critical civil right, it really became a film that has to entertain and inspire, but has to really push for activism and to fire us all up, because you want to get people fired up and then you want them to know what they have to do.
Let me ask you, how did you find Kareem?
We had been filming for about a year and a half. And, as you know, a documentary is a time of sort of deep discovery and peeling the layers back of the onion and doing the research. And sometimes you're doing a pivot because you think you're going to tell one story and then you meet a character and then you're going to tell a slightly different story. And we met Kareem through someone who was on Emily Hanford's very first podcast. And she's a literacy coach in Oakland. And she had been meeting with us on Zoom because this was in the very beginning of COVID-19. And she just gave us some great information. And as we're sort of meeting someone who is connected to someone else, and the education and the literacy world it's a really fantastic network. And people who are passionate about this issue just know each other, and there's this amazing connection and network. And so that's how we met Kareem.
We'll be right back. This episode is sponsored by IMSE, the Institute for Multisensory Education. With a deep commitment to transforming literacy outcomes for all students for over 25 years, IMSE provides effective structured literacy, professional development, and curriculum. IMSE equips educators with literacy knowledge, a complete set of classroom tools, teacher guides, lesson plans, digital resources, and implementation support to ensure all students learn to read. Rooted in the science of reading and the Orton-Gillingham methodology, IMSE's programs are explicit, systematic, sequential, and cumulative, guiding educators nationwide toward proficient literacy outcomes. Visit IMSE.com, that's IMSE.com, to join the growing community of educators making the IMSE impact. Parents for Reading Justice is a nonprofit grassroots movement dedicated to ensuring every child learns to read by engaging parents and educators in adopting the science of teaching reading. Please watch our award-winning film, Our Dyslexic Children, take our masterclass, and to ensure all our services remain free of charge, please consider making a donation today, all at parentsforreadingjustice.org. One of the things I love about this work is the people who are doing it. They are such good, committed, because like you say, there's not a lot of money in it. So if you're doing this, you really do care about the issue. Really some quality people. What were some of the biggest challenges for you in making this film and finishing the film?
I mean, I think the biggest piece for us in the first 2 years was really finding the through line and finding the storyline. We started the film thinking that it was going to be a film about kindergarten readiness and why kids don't come to kindergarten prepared with pre-literacy skills. And then we found two of the families that are in the film, the Hunters and the Adams family, who are remarkable advocates for their children, bringing in every tool possible to set their kids up for success. And I think what we found, stumbling upon Emily's very first podcast, 4-ish years ago, on how kids learn to read or don't learn to read, is we realized that even if parents are doing everything they can with pre-literacy skills, if then those kids are going into a kindergarten program, going into a first grade program that uses balanced literacy or whole language or 3Qing, they're actually undoing things that have already happened from a family's point of view to set a kid up for success. So I think finding the story is always a big challenge in an issue-driven documentary. And then we found Kareem, which was a dream and fantastic for the story because he's so inspirational, he's so accessible, he's so authentic and real and gets you fired up. But I think the second challenge was really having to shoot through COVID-19. And if you ask any filmmaker who's made a film over the last 3 or 4 years, that would be the number one challenge. And here he is doing grassroots activism. And at the time, he was mostly doing his activism on Zoom. So you getting him doing his work was a little bit of a challenge.
One thing that's interesting that you just mentioned, if a lot of people think exactly what you thought when you were originally setting out to make the film, and that is that somehow it's the family's fault for not preparing the kid, or the kid doesn't have enough money, or they don't, there's something that's wrong with the kid and the family. And it's so beautiful that you spent the time and really figured out that most of it has to do with the way that they are teaching reading, that kids can learn to read regardless of their circumstance in almost all cases. That is so important.
Mm-hmm.
That's
absolutely
critical.
I mean, if we were using the methods that should be taught for someone like me who has dyslexia, if we were using explicit systematic reading instruction that is evidence-based, where we have the research in all schools, I think we could be in a situation where 95% of fourth graders are reading at proficient levels. And it's a challenging task for the brain. We have hundreds of neuroscience that is out there, studies upon studies upon studies from brain scientists that shows how the brain learns to read. And it's not a natural process for we humans. It's a tough process.
Well, and that comes from the American Federation of Teachers and that report that Louisa Moats did, the Teaching Reading is Rocket Science. So if the American Federation of Teachers are saying that, these are the people who are supposed to be doing it, and they're fighting to do it, but what do you see? This is interesting to me, that as kind of an outside observer, I'm a business person who had a daughter with dyslexia, and that's how I got into it. But I'm outside of education altogether. What do you think is what are some of the primary reasons that we are not teaching reading the way we should be teaching reading?
I mean, I think it's complicated, and I think there are lots of variables that have impacted why we aren't teaching with methods that really show that they work for many, many big demographics. But I think sort of the short and simple answer is that we have historically prioritized profits and politics over children's outcomes in education. And we've had this evidence that has been there. I mean, the National Reading Panel that came together, and then I think we just haven't held writers of curriculum accountable. We haven't held schools accountable, school boards, decision makers in a way that needs to happen. And I think thanks to Emily Hanford's groundbreaking journalism, I think she's really started this amazing wave, and we feel lucky to be a part of it.
Yeah, she's extraordinary.
She
actually, her first reading podcast was in 2017, and she interviewed our parent group, and it was about how American schools don't serve children with dyslexia. So, yeah.
I
So
remember her talking about that, actually. I remember that because dyslexia was sort of her way into learning about the science of reading, right? That's right.
Yeah, because she's not dyslexic, nor does she have a child with dyslexia, but she kept hearing, she was a reporter, but this was kind of the first story that piqued her interest. And so thank God, I remember her, interviewing us in the basement, but somehow it set her on this journey. I guess like all of us, once you know this, once that you know that only a third of the kids in the country are proficient readers, that 37% are below basic and what that means, and that we know how to teach those kids, it's like you can't help but continue to do this work all the time and fight because it's so
it's
insane.
A light bulb moment for all of us. Absolutely. To say, wait a minute, these are all of our kids. Shouldn't we collectively care about this group and come together and fight this fight because it's worth fighting for?
So the film, for people who haven't seen it, so it definitely raises awareness, because I do think that's important. But what do you want people to do? So what is the call to action for you for this film?
Well, the call to action is really Kareem's call to action that comes at the end of the film. And we hope that people are courageous and brave enough to ask their teachers, ask their principals, ask their superintendents, talk to their school boards, talk to their legislators, and say, what kind of early reading instruction are you using at the K-3 level? And does it include 3Qing? Does it include picture power? Are you using the research and the science that we know works with a significant demographic of children? And I think Kareem has done an incredible job looking at a lot of the data that is out there through some of the curricula that is not effective with a majority of our children. And the challenge is it's been tested in very small demographics that are from specific races, ethnicities, and socioeconomic classes. And we need to really expand that kind of research, right? So that we can see what curricula works for what demographics. So I hope people walk away from the film fired up and ready to ask questions in their own communities.
Well, and let me do a little plug for our organization, because when you go to your district and you ask them if they're doing 3Qing, and if you find out that they are, and they are not receptive to the science of reading, our organization helps you to come together as a parent group, because you have more power together coming in and having those conversations with your administration, with the school board, etc. And so if you have a hard time going at this as a group, you'll have much better success. How about, what is the next phase for you beyond this film relating to literacy and children learning to read? Is this piqued an interest for you?
Well, we're really lucky that we got a grant, a social impact grant for the film. And so I think for sure the next year of my life is going to be focused on working with our amazing impact campaign lead, who is setting up screenings in communities across the country. On March 2, National Read Across America Day, we are setting up an activation where people can watch the film for free online. It has been insane watching the ticks go up on our counter. I think we have something like 11,000 people who've already requested to watch the film online. So we think we're in trouble with the bandwidth and the system that we've
Well,
set
email
up.
me if I should get off, because I did sign up, but if there's an issue, yeah.
Yeah. But you make a film like this that's a social impact, social justice documentary. And I think what I feel most excited about is to let the film get out there and do the work that it can do. And, it's really putting it out to communities and allowing communities to come together and bring their own leaders and influencers in their community and teachers and families so that they can participate in a discussion and use the film for what it's meant to be used for, which is a catalyst to create long-term change. But I will always be a part of this movement. I mean, once you become a part of the early literacy movement, I feel like you're a lifer, right?
Yeah.
And my daughter is a first grade teacher too. So
Oh, wow.
through my own history and now my daughter, I feel like it's education and early literacy is a part of my life.
I'm always so jealous when I listen to educators talk. I listened to Tim Odegaard. I don't know if you've met him, but I was at a conference last week or the other week, and he was talking. He's dyslexic, and he has a son with dyslexia. And from day one, he was doing rhyming things with him. And, he was doing all these things so that his son's phonemic awareness was good. But he got in a situation where he was in a balanced literacy classroom, and it's astounding. Like you say, you can prepare your child, but if you don't get them good tier 1 core reading instruction in school, you can unravel all of that. But I just wish I had known. I wish we had known earlier. So,
yeah. Have you seen the purple video online, Brett? It's a part of our film, actually. We use a clip of it, but I don't know if you've ever, okay, you need to watch it. It is so unbelievable. Just Google on YouTube the purple video, but it's made by a remarkable woman who got married, and I think she's still remaining fairly anonymous in terms of her authorship of this film that she made with her own child reading. And she married a man. He's dyslexic. He had so much dyslexia in his family. She is a behavior scientist, super smart. I think she may even work at Stanford, but she's in the Bay Area at UCSF or Stanford or something. And her daughter, who she was worried about, came home from first grade with directions on 3Qing and guessing. And one of I can't remember what the units of study has their little books. And she did this video with her. She literally was like, oh my God, what am I doing here? This is just what I've dreaded, that I'm going to have a child in a classroom like this where she's taught to guess and picture power and all this stuff. And she does this beautiful job making this 11-minute proof research. It's a one case situation, but her daughter comes home with these instructions to guess, to look at the pictures as she's reading the sentences. And then she covers the pictures, and her daughter can't even come close to sounding out and decoding a word with each letter sound. So we have a clip of that in a montage that comes up in our film, but you should watch it on its own. It's really quite extraordinary.
Now that you're describing it, I have seen maybe not the whole 11 minutes, but it is, and it seems, this is what's strange also. Once you realize what's going on and what 3Qing is actually teaching and how it's essentially teaching kids how to read like poor readers. It's stripping them away from any attempt at decoding. It's extraordinary that people still back it. Once you see the difference, it's hard to understand.
Yeah, I so agree. It's really quite surprising. And when you see a kid who has those foundational skills and is really able to understand each letter sound, go through phonemic awareness, blend letters, decode them, and sound out big words. I mean, it is just, it's quite phenomenal because you see that is what they mean when they say crack the code. That is cracking the code.
Well, and we've interviewed Louisa Moats several times. She was in our documentary, and she said, there's this thing that if you're teaching this systematic, explicit, it's boring or somehow it's rote or it's too technical. And she's very eloquent, when she says that really, you're teaching them to read. And then when they can read, they feel excited and are excited to read and happy and love to read. It's not, you have to be able to read to love to read. If you can't read, you can't love to read. It is the essential skill you need to start the whole thing.
Absolutely. I think they often sort of say drill and kill, and it's drill and skill. And of course, there has to be practice. Of course, there has to be repetition. It's a complicated task that we're learning and that we're training our brain to do.
Let me ask about, the film was finished filming a year or two ago. So I know how Kareem's doing. I do some work with him. How are those two little kids in the film doing? The girl with the big glasses. Do you keep up with the kids in the film?
Oh, I
They're
stay
darling.
in such close touch with them. I mean, really, we FaceTime, we call, we text very regularly, and they will be seeing the film for the first time in its, sort of fine cut when it's available and free online. And then they'll be attending in-person screenings, and they're going to be doing a bit of traveling with the film too, which we're so excited to do because, as you know, making a documentary, it's a process of deep collaboration. And I think this has been a unique story for me to tell. And I really wanted the families as well as Kareem to feel this collaboration and feel good about the stories that they are sharing because it's their story, right? And we really, I think, feel proud that there was so much collaboration involved. But Ivy is 5.5. She is thriving in kindergarten and reading. She actually read to me. I could show you even a photo on my phone because I took a photo when we were FaceTiming. She read to me about a week ago. And Frederick is finishing 3rd grade, and he's reading above grade level. And yeah, big year. And I think, really his first full year not being remote because he's truly a COVID kid.
Oh, yeah. So the schools that they were in, I know that they had to move. I know that Frederick had to move, but the schools that they were in were teaching structured literacy. So they were both safe in that way.
Yeah. I mean, Mississippi, as you know, has been really a leader in terms of changing the percentages and seeing improvements in their literacy rates because they have not only brought in structured literacy curricula, but they've also been training teachers at their teacher colleges. So I think looking at it from a practice level as well as training the teachers' point of view. And Melinda and Fred were living in the Mississippi Delta, very rural part of Mississippi. And although I think the schools were seeing changes in their percentages, they had a hard time finding work in that area. And so it was really economic issues that drove them out of the state and caused them to move.
Okay.
So they're in Memphis right now.
Yeah, I was thinking, I don't know how well Memphis does, but
they're in one of the lowest performing districts. So we actually have an impact screening in Memphis on March 11th, which is going to be fantastic. And we are collaborating with Memphis Lift, which is an amazing nonprofit that cares deeply about Black families and children in the community, healthcare, education. And they're just an incredible advocacy organization. So they are partnering with us, and we're going to have a significant screening there that the NAACP is involved in as well.
I think Sonia Thomas is in Tennessee. I don't know if you've run across her, but she might be Nashville Propel, but another organization that you guys might invite in. I'm not sure how far away that is, but she's doing significant things as well. Well, we want to, thank you. And give you a chance just to leave people with, one final thought. What do you want them to take away from this?
Well, I think LeVar Burton, our amazing executive producer, said it so perfectly. He said, I can rest when I die, Jenny. And right now it's time to fight for the next generation. And if we really think about what is the most foundational thing that any of us on this planet can do for the next generation, it's to set them up for success and be literate so that they can participate in our world and really be a part of our economy, be a part of their fellow students, their colleagues when they grow up. And what happens when someone is illiterate is they're illiterate for life. And the risk factor just, for so many challenges goes screaming up when a kid isn't reading by fourth grade. So I hope the film gets people fired up. I feel as though Emily Hanford really started a movement that we've been so ready for. And I feel as though this film is now a part of that movement. And I think, the women's rights movement, the civil rights movement, this is the literacy movement. And I hope we raise awareness and fire people up to ask questions and be bold and stand for change, demand change.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And have so much fun on all your the film festivals and the whole circuit you're about to do.
Thank you so much.
Literacy Now is a podcast designed specifically for parents in our effort to ensure every child learns to read. Parents deserve a seat at the table, and we bring their voices to the fore. We invite you to join the Parents for Reading Justice community on all of our socials, and make sure to visit our website to watch our documentary and to take our masterclass. All of our content is free of charge because every child deserves to learn to read. This episode was brought to you by parentsforreadingjustice.org, produced by Brett Tingley and Keita Mascaro.